So maybe let's first start with this question, asking ourselves, when I talk about electron flow, let's see what you all can come up with. Feel free to just type in the chat, or just flow in general. Okay, just flow in general. What type of flow can you come up with? Or when I mention the word flow, what's the first type of flow that comes in your mind? Feel free to type in the chat while I reorganize. Okay, so let's see. Yep, don't be shy. Go ahead. Think about what type of flow. Okay, there are people. Water flow. Electric current, electric. That type of flow. That's great. Keep it coming. I'm up for all types of answers. And if you are, how should I say, if you are creative, I've asked this question to other people, other crowds too, and I got some really interesting answers. So feel free to use your imagination. What type of flow? Cash flow, right? Right. That's a great one. Cash flow. We all care about that. That's very important. Let's see what other flow you can come up with. Okay, cash flow, water flow. These are all great things. Okay. Yeah, just keep that coming. So I will actually start diving into today's public talk. Keep that in mind. Different types of flow. So to me, when I think about flow, I think about quite a number of things. Let me bring up my laser pointer. Okay, there we go. So, I actually would think about various things. Flow can be, we talk about different direction. It can be unidirectional, from me talking to you, or it could be, circular, right? We have a discussion, like in the chat. You tell me something, I tell you something. Or in the, water flow, like the water flow that we talked about just now. It could be in the ocean, and then it could be a circular one. We talk about money flow, cash flow. That's of course very important in any type of business. If you want to survive, especially under this pandemic situation, cash flow is actually a big thing. And of course, there's heat flow, right? Energy flow. That's something that you might have heard of in physics or in some other science classes, right? And so all these are very important. That's really driving our economy, driving our society, or basically driving basically life on Earth or something like that. And so it's really important to think about flow. And of course, for those who have read the title, right, we talk about electron flow. Then obviously, we can't escape from talking about basically the electrical circuit, basically electricity, right? That's basically a flow, and that's the typical way that we learn about the power grids, right? We started from the power plant, and then eventually through electrons, right? Basically going through these wires and cables, and eventually it's all funneled down to basically where you use at your at home, right? And so that's the way we learn about electron flow in our daily life. But is that really the only type of electron flow? There's just so many ways that you can come up with that there are actually electron flow going on, just that we are not paying attention enough. Okay, and then there's also this flow. Must it always go like this, always going from the power plant to our home? And then of course, if we start thinking about it, that's a little bit in the past. If we look towards the future, right? We have to think about, we're not just always using these fossil fuels, right? Which we know would run out, and it's not good for the environment in general. And so if we have a way that we can deal with these renewable energy sources, right? You can, maybe from the picture and all those, you can think about, what have we learned before about renewable? Then you probably think about, oh, there's solar, right? Sunlight. There's wind, okay? There's so many different types of renewable that may replace fossil fuel and all those. And so the way of our energy grid in the future could look very different. It may no longer look like it's from a point source, one source, then that supply the whole city or something. We can actually install solar panels on our rooftops, right? We can have different types of power generating devices. And so the idea in the future is that it's actually a very dynamic microgrid, so to speak, is that we need some kind of computer program to help us figure it out. It's possible during daytime, even the residential area can be generating energy from solar, and then feeding that extra energy back to the grid to where let's say businesses, the business district or industry or the factories will be where it's consuming the most energy in the daytime, right? And then maybe you can also store it in some type of battery or some storage devices. And then at night, when people go home, that's where people use the energy. So then you will have the energy flow the other way around. So it's a very, very dynamic one, depending on the season, whether it's summer or winter, depending on whether it's a cloudy day or sunny day or something. That whole dynamic would change. And you can see how the electron flow actually fluctuates over time, depending on the demand and supply. Okay, and so this is what we have to cope with, and then we have to come up with new technologies and new algorithms to deal with the whole situation. How do we distribute the energy? How do we capture the energy? How do we utilize the energy? Okay, and all these have to do with electron flow. And so here is just one concept of how people are thinking about in the future how we can power this planet. Okay, and so just from this very brief cartoon, right, you can already see a few things that's familiar that you probably would know. Okay, we're talking about solar. Okay, out in the desert or some other rural places where you can have a huge solar farm, or you can have it on your rooftop. Okay, and then you can also have these wind farm, or it can be offshore, by the sea or in the mountains. There's tidal waves depending on the time of the day, things like that. But then you can also tell, of course, there's the geothermal heating that depends on your particular geographical location on Earth, whether it's possible or not. But then all these, you can spot maybe some difficulties with them, right? Just really think about it. Do you always see the sun? Okay, that's a very good question, right? At nighttime, you at most you see the reflection of the sunlight from the moon, but that's definitely not strong enough, right? And so clearly at night, there's not enough solar, right? Or if it's a cloudy day, what if there's a typhoon, right? Probably you won't receive too much sunlight. Then what happens if your whole society runs on solar directly without any storage? You'll be in huge trouble. What if the wind doesn't blow? What if the sun doesn't shine? That's the basic question of all these. You can capture and harvest however much you want, but if you cannot store it, what's the point? Okay, and so having a very effective storage system is very important. Okay, you need something that you can store this energy, and then of course, if you're looking at your phone and all those, oh yeah, I can just charge it, and batteries are all around us. But the thing is that maybe it's hard to scale up. You have already heard of these explosions or fire due to all these phone usage and things like that. And so definitely storage and safety come hand in hand. Okay, and you need something that is not just about powering one phone. We're talking about powering the whole society. That is a massive battery we're talking about. So how can we do it? Okay, there are people talking about, oh, maybe we can store it in terms of a chemical fuel. If it's a liquid, then it's a different case. We make some alcohol or whatever that we can burn. We can use existing pipelines so that we can pump them. Then it's a different story, right? And of course, there's also something that's called a pumped hydro. I really want to highlight this part because most people don't really talk about it, and I really want to since you are interested in electron flow and all these, let me just show you how you can couple electron flow with water flow. Okay, it's essentially a very simple idea. If you geographically you have a location that allows you to build a dam, okay, and you pump water uphill. That's essentially what you're doing, okay? When you have excess energy, that means you use electrons to help you drive the pumps and have you pump water uphill. That's when you have excess water. And when you need energy, okay, when you're at home at night, you need, a lot of people are turning on their AC or turning on the heater in the winter or whatnot, okay? That's when there's an energy spike, right? You need energy. What do? You open the dam, water flow down, and then you get the energy back. And strangely enough, you might think this is not too energy efficient. Strangely enough, it's one of the best in terms of efficiency or round trip efficiency for these pump hydro as compared to other fuel type or any battery type of technology. This one you can use it for many years, and then you can keep pumping it. And then when some of the water is being evaporated, you just pour a little bit more water back. Okay, so it's a very, very viable technology, provided that of course you have the land to build that system. Okay, so of course there's pros and cons of all these technology, but then you sometimes you just didn't know that we already have all these technology with us. We know pumps very, very well. Okay, and so we are very good at building things as well as a human race, and so that is actually kind of a solved problem. Okay, but then obviously if we want to implement that, let's just say in Hong Kong right now, or in a densely populated city, in the middle, we just cannot afford just opening, just basically clearing that huge land mass just for building this dam and this water storage system. Okay, so that's why chemistry and all these engineering and all these come into play, is how can we store this energy. Okay, and so of course once we have to store all these energy, we can think about other methods to utilize this energy. There are fuel cells and other things, and so you can already see how all these electron flow connect all these ideas together. Okay, and so I'll briefly go over some of these technologies that electron flow would be there present that you might expect, and at the end I will also touch on a little bit of a few things in our biological system, in DNA, protein, lipid, and biofilm, things that are you might not expect that electron will be there, and they are actually there. Okay, I'll walk you through. But before you can understand all these concepts, this is the one sneak peek into studying all these electron flow idea. It has everything to do with something called redox. Okay, it's essentially a made-up word. It comes from reduction and oxidation, and you put reduction and oxidation, the red and ox together, you get redox. Okay, and that's essentially what it is. And then for reduction reaction, we call it a cathodic. For oxidation reaction, we call it anodic. And it's hard to remember, right? I mean, it's hard to remember all these terminologies and all those. So today, I'm give you one tip to how to remember this, and you will never forget. Okay, I am a person who loves cats. Okay, I love cats, and so that's how you remember it. If you remember red cat, then you will never get it wrong. Red cat means reduction, red, cathodic, cat, and that's for gaining reaction, gaining electrons. So if you only remember this part, red cat is gaining electron, then you will not mess up any of the system. No matter what electrochemical, battery, whatever system people throw at you, as long as you remember red cat equals gaining an electron, okay, then you're good. Okay, and that's how all you have to remember. And then essentially that's how you follow the electron to realize what's going on. Okay, so you have a donor, you have an acceptor. Okay, and essentially the idea here is that you have two things coming together, and then one electron jumps from one entity to the other. Okay, so the one that is more electron rich, they're the donors, right? They give up the electron. Okay, and then so they will be the one that's reducing the other entity, and this entity that's being that received the electron, it's being reduced. Okay, so you can just follow this, gaining an electron or losing an electron or donating an electron or accepting an electron. All these concepts come into play, then you will know what is reduction and what's oxidation. Gaining an electron equals reduction, losing an electron is oxidation, and it's as simple as this. And with just that concept in mind, you can already understand this Nobel Prize technology that's being given out last year. That's basically on lithium-ion batteries, and so that is essentially happening in, basically probably on your laptop right now that you're using, or on your phone, or all these portable devices that you use. Essentially the idea is you have some lithium ion on one side of the battery. As you're charging it, the lithium goes one side, as electrons go one side, and as you're charging it, electron goes the other way back, and then the lithiums go back. Okay, and that's essentially how a lithium-ion battery works. Just follow the electron flow. You can visualize it, you can see it, and that's how your battery works. That's what happens when you charge your phone, when you plug in your phone to your wall socket, or if you are fancy enough to have an electric vehicle, that's essentially what's happening. That's happening to you, essentially. any of these devices. Okay, as long as you follow the electron flow, you're all good. Okay, and so here's just another example. Electron flow can actually be visualized as well. It's a very, very real phenomenon. You can see as you are doing a reduction here, or oxidation, or deposition, or whatever, you can see the color change right away. Okay, you can see it turning blue in this case. Or you can, of course, have it turn different colors. And then there are different people, using different devices these days. If you're on a fancy plane before, or when traveling becomes a norm again, some of these plane companies already have this technology that they can turn the color of the window pane from basically colorless to blue to darker and darker without you actually having to close the lid or anything. Everything can just be controlled again with just a knob, a touch of your finger. Then it changes all these coloring, and it has everything to deal with, again, electron flowing in there, doing some type of deposition, changing some chemical reaction, and then going backwards, the electrons go the other way, then it becomes clear. Okay, all these technology are there, and then same thing, you can use this to make a sensor of it. Again, if you have an analyte, it can be anything. We can talk about maybe this COVID-19 thing we're talking about. If there's a signal that you can pick up that it's giving up an electron or gaining an electron, it works just fine. You can have a bioanalytical sensor. As we have more of these analyte touching the electrode, more electrons come on or come off, then we will see a bigger signal. We can actually sense how much of this particular virus or DNA, whatever that is in solution. Okay, and so people have also come up with the idea that you can use it to detect, let's say, cancer. There are some cancer biomarkers that can be redox active. They can lose an electron or gain an electron. In this case, it's a protein, and then you can actually use this, take this as your advantage to basically build a sensor. Essentially, the idea is like this. You have a sensor. Again, you have proteins coming in. It can lose an electron or it can gain an electron, depending on which way it's going. You can build a sensor. So there's, you just follow the electron flow. There are just so many things you can do. You can charge up your battery. You can, make a sensor to save people's lives. Just, so many things like that. And then so, since I've been talking a little bit, so maybe see if you can come up with an idea of, what redox reactions you might have come across in daily life. So, see if you can think of, any scenario that you might have learned in class or, when you're walking on the street or whatever, that, reduction and oxidation actually happens, and then see if you can, think of any of these scenarios. Okay, feel free to type it in the chat. See if you can come up with all these you might have heard of. I can also give you some hints. The reason why we are all here, that we are all alive, okay? The reason why we are breathing, okay? Right there, okay, someone got it, okay? Metabolism, okay? That's one of them, okay? Rusting of iron, photosynthesis, all these are great examples, okay? Things that, you might have learned in class, you might not expect that they actually, have this redox reaction going on, okay? And so, the idea here is that, you might have learned in class, oh, trees are very important and all these doing photosynthesis. That reaction alone actually involves electron and protons. Sunlight coming in, driving certain reactions, and actually it drives electrons to go from one way to the other and then drive the reaction, okay? Same thing with respiration, the way that we are breathing, okay? It's because of this reaction. It's actually we're doing some type of oxygen reduction, okay? And that, again, is the reason why we breathe. We take in oxygen, and that has to do with everything, with electron flow. You can tell from the reaction, protons and electrons are involved. And then not just in nature, and not just in the mitochondria and all those, in factories and many other things, electron flow everywhere, okay? And so some of you, just now we briefly mentioned about these electric vehicles, and actually in the future, apart from electric vehicles, there are some other vehicles that are called fuel cell vehicles that run on hydrogen or some other fuels. And so these vehicles are actually predicted to be much better in terms of comparing to the normal cars that we're driving on the street these days. is because they are more sustainable, they're clean. The reason why it's the case is because when we're driving these cars, it's putting hydrogen here, oxygen coming in, and then it's just making water as the only product. So it's very, very clean. And that's essentially what's happening on the space station as well. In the space station, that's how they're doing all these things with platinum fuel cells and things like that. And so if fuel cells are really that good, why aren't we all driving it, right? Well, you have to think about it. Well, NASA and all these space station, of course, they can get their hands on the newest and best technology because burning money is okay for them, okay? But for normal people like us, purchasing such expensive technology, could be a little bit financially challenging for us. And so there is some limitation to us why we cannot drive these vehicles. And apart from the money part, okay, and in part that ties to these two problems too, is the activity and the selectivity of the catalyst that drive the reaction that I was just talking to you just now. There's the hydrogen and oxygen, these reactions going on. They require pretty expensive catalysts, okay? And the activity and selectivity are the problem. So I'm quickly going to show you, some of these technologies being developed these days, in terms of, basically, using some type of laser technology, then you can make these nanoparticles, be it, precious or non-precious metals directly on, some type of graphene, carbon, and things like that. And all these can be used as a very durable catalyst for fuel cell, trying to lower the costs and improve the durability of all these. There are many things being studied. And other things you can think about, platinum is very expensive. So there are some other things that one may do is to look into nature, okay? Try to learn and mimic all these proteins in nature. So you can try to look at that, protein that looks like this. You can try to look at the active site and then try to build something, as a chemist, using molecules to make something that hopefully is stable and active and cheap and all those, these are the qualities that we're going after, okay? So all these are trying to address the activity issue, something that can work very, very well, against oxygen. And there are, of course, other technologies out there that you can, basically use very, very high temperature for you to make these nanoparticles. We're talking about 5 nanometers. This is almost like 1,000 times thinner than your hair, okay? So these are the technologies that people are dealing with or trying to develop, hoping to drive down the cost and then improve the activity of these catalysts, okay? And then so, there are lots of these going on. It's very, very fun thing to play with high temperature, play with, all these really challenging, gases and things like that, okay? And then I want to briefly touch on the selectivity problem, which I think I can drive from this point by showing you this figure, okay? Most of you who have lived in Hong Kong or essentially anywhere in the world would probably have seen some of these road signs, right? Something like that. You're trying to drive one way and it's telling you that there's an upcoming crossroad or junction. Turn left, you go somewhere, turn right, you go somewhere. Of course, there are roundabouts, okay? But let's just talk about these junctions for now, okay? So that's essentially what product selectivity means. That essentially it means for a reaction, you're at a point that you can go different way and make different products, okay? And that's essentially what we are trying to do. So let's say for this oxygen reduction reaction, okay? We start from O2, and then we're adding electrons in and then trying to drive the reaction. And then eventually it hit a point, okay? It hit a point that it can either choose to be something or something else, okay? What would those be? It could be some products, like superoxide or hydrogen peroxide that you don't want. Okay, these are high energy species that's damaging. But you actually want water. That's something that's clean, that we talk about this technology, right? So how can you make sure that this reaction only goes to not the bad reaction, the bad products, okay, not these two, but only do the good reaction and make the desired product? That's the challenge. And that's what selectivity means. That's essentially just like on the road, okay? Do I want to go left? Do I want to go right? Do I want to go shopping? Or do I want to go to the beach? Or where do I want to go? That's essentially, you need to pick a path. And that's how difficult it is, you can think about if you're on the road, okay, you're the one driving, right? You can do all these things. But we're talking a molecule that's even smaller than the nanoparticle that I was talking to you just now. Even smaller things. How can you manipulate? How can you control that? That's the important part, okay? And so people have developed all these crazy looking complicated systems that we can even control so precisely, not just atoms, not just molecules, okay? We're talking about electrons and protons. We can even control how fast they are going, how many they are going on the other side, and how we can couple the two together to do different reactions. And that's, the crazy things on all these is that, we can have this system that looks pretty much nothing like a protein in nature, but can do essentially everything. Like, in nature, we can control the proton pathway like here, we can control the electron path like here, we can control how O2 and all those come in, just like a protein, just like an enzyme, okay? And that's how you can control all these electron flow and all these coming together, okay? And lastly, since I have been trying to allude to you all these, about all these artificial systems, and then bringing you all the way to talking about mitochondria, we are breathing, and then talking about these proteins, I want to show you that in biological system, actually electron flow is there. And so what do I mean by that? Is that, you can have a fuel cell that looks like this, you have artificial catalyst, or you can actually have bacteria growing on the electrode, okay? You have bacteria on the electrode, and then so those bacteria are soaking in there, and guess what? They're not dying. I mean, they can actually help you to do the reaction that you want, okay? To actually facilitate electron flow, to basically help you, squeeze out the energy that you want and things like that. And so the idea of all these have to come back to something called biofilm. And so this biofilm essentially contains living bacteria and at the same time, dead bacteria, okay? And essentially it's within these dead bacteria that's being lysed, they are open, that they would contain some of these so-called extracellular DNA. They have these redox molecule in there. They have a lot of these, dead cell debris, lipids, all these proteins and things like that in here that help facilitate this whole process. Okay, so I'll slowly walk you through. This is a sort of maybe a new concept to you, but you've probably seen them. Okay, in your toilet sink or in your bathroom, you might have seen some mold or some other things growing there. Some of those could be biofilms. Okay, and so here is something that people are taking a video of how they grow. I will show you one more time. You can see how they grow. The peculiar shape and morphology of all those. It's kind of crazy looking, right? You see how there's sort of like there's some veins here, and it's growing larger and larger. Some of these are taller features, some are lower features, and things like that. It's mesmerizing to look at. How does it grow like this? You probably would be asking, well, why does it grow like this? How does this work and all this? And I will just give you a very brief hint to you that this shape has to do partially with electron flow. Okay, electron flow has a role to play in this process that you may not have expected. Well, as I have not expected when I was working on this project as well. But guess what? And so why do these biofilms grow like this? It's really interesting to look at. And so, of course, if you're interested today, the whole point of this talk is to get you excited about all these electron flow, just like how excited I am. And so you're of course encouraged to read more about all these and things like that. I'm just giving you a very prelude, to all the exciting world that you're about to dive into if you're interested. Once you open the right doors, you will get surprised and intrigued by nature like never before. Okay, so in this case, there's something like these redox molecules. Okay, they can undergo a redox reaction, gain and lose electrons. These are the molecules. The part that you probably have to remember is that they can actually react with oxygen, just like the one in fuel cell that I just mentioned to you. They will make some type of product. The key is that they can basically send an electron from one molecule all the way to the O2. Why do I say that is the most important part to remember? It's because oxygen has to come in. Remember just now that biofilm, Oxygen has to come in from the outside, okay? Long before the oxygen goes inside, it's being consumed by some of the bacteria. So most of the bacteria living in the interior doesn't see or receive any oxygen. You can imagine it's almost like you're living in a bunker underground, okay? And then you're trying to get nutrients up top from the Earth's surface. Well, if no one is transporting any of those supplies to you, you probably will be starved to death. That's essentially the case. They are oxygen starved in there, okay? So how do they gain access to O2? Or in other words, how do they lose electrons, donate this electron to O2? That is the question that they want to answer. They have too much electron in there, and then there's too much oxygen on the outside. There's this dilemma. So how do they somehow have the electrons on one side react with the oxygen on the other side? That's what they want to do, okay? And so here is where this story gets interesting, is that they have these redox molecules that can help take the electron and bring it all the way out to the oxygen. That's one pathway. And the other pathway is that DNA, if you really look at the structure, the base pair and all those, the base stack, they are stacked, just like, those graphene sheets are stacked on graphite, which can, conduct electrons. So DNA can help electrons to be transported from the interior to the outside to the O2, okay? And so you can already tell, well, this story, it's crazy. Everything that we've talked about, today, we talk about electron flow, we talk about oxygen reduction, we talk about redox molecule, we talk about all those. Everything is like stir fry. Everything comes together in this one dish, on this one slide. Every concept that I tell you is actually here. And you can already tell that how electron flow, that originally maybe we're just thinking, oh, it only happens in our phone or in our cars and all those things. No, it goes way beyond that. It's in the molecules, in the reactions that we talk about, okay, that drives our society or a future society. And not just that, even in nature, it has been happening for thousands or millions of years. Within our body, in the biofilms, lipids, proteins, and DNA, all these electrons play a very, very important role. Okay, so with that, I am going to observe the time that I'm given. So I'm going to end my talk here by showing you, of course, the work that I've shown you, in this public talk is not just done by myself, but also from my colleagues and peers and friends, and of course other people before me who has worked on this, the scientists and researchers in the field, working on all these technologies and knowledge together. And lastly, of course, for the work that actually came from my group, of course, I have to thank the people in my group. These are the students and postdocs in my lab. And of course, I'm fortunate to have them work on this project. And so, my lab is really welcoming. We welcome everyone to, anyone who is interested in any of those type of idea to come. Especially like this student right here, Michael. He is actually a high school student when he actually joined me, a secondary school student when he joined my lab, and is having actually a lot of fun with the Biofilm project. So I welcome anyone who is interested in essentially science and exploration. Feel free to drop me a line by email or type in the chat. I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Or if you want to know more about my lab, you can visit my group website via the QR code or this lab website. So with that, I'm going to stop and answer any questions if you have any. So thank you for staying here. And so, yes, I think, let's start, in the chat to see who have some questions. I think, I'm not sure what you meant by photon eyes. Is that like a product? I'm not exactly sure what that is. But I'll be interested to look that up to see what that is. And then what is it to promote our health? Electron flow is really important in many sense, as mentioned, right? A lot of our bodily function requires a proper regulation of our redox homeostasis. Basically the electron, there's something called oxidative stress, And recently, there are also people who realize that there is also something called reductive stress. Essentially, it's just too many or too little electrons. Okay, so our bodies fail to cope with that situation, and so those are a pretty dangerous situation. And so that's why we need to study and pay attention to basically electron flow, not just in our phone and all those, but also at the same time within our body and all those. We need to manage that very, very carefully. So yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. If you have other questions, not just on my talk, but if you have questions regarding the science program, or if you have a chemistry question or the chemistry program or anything, feel free to raise your questions or let me know. We still have quite some people on the participant list. So let's see if we have anyone else. Any other questions? Oh, so I guess photon eyes is like a surveillance or a basically capturing technology that looks at trucks and all those and things. And I guess of course is an electronic device or technology. So yeah, there is some I believe electron flow going around there. It's a technology. And then will this advance the generation of robots? Good question. So there are many different types of robots we're talking about. So of course, there are the big robots, and for those who grew up, watching animes and cartoons like me, big robots like Gundam and all those. Of course, that's one of our fantasy. Okay, but I want to talk about a different type of robot in answering your question. There's actually people starting to think, can we miniaturize these robots? Okay, can we have robots smaller? There's of course people talking about nano robots or nanobots. Essentially, the idea is having them as like a drug or a therapy. Okay, have them basically nanomedicine in some sense, introduced in your bloodstream or in people. Essentially, the idea here is maybe cancer cell is here. You can engineer this nanorobot with some a sensor unit or a targeting unit or whatever, find the cancer, localize around there, and then act upon. Maybe it will shine light, to let illuminate light, so that okay, where the cancer is. So that will help surgeons to actually help cut, and do the surgical removal of the cancer site, if that's one of the application. Or you can actually combine them with some photodynamic or photothermal therapy. What does it mean? Essentially, you shine light, it heats up and kills the cancer cell, or you shine light, it generates a chemical species and it kills the cancer cell. Or it can actually contains, it's sort of like the chemical warhead. Okay, this nanoparticle, or nanorobot, okay, swims and finds the cancer cell, and it delivers the payload and kills the cancer cell with that whatever drug that it's carrying. So these are the things that people are thinking about. Is there are many different types of robots. One can think about. It may not always be the big ones that you maybe send to the moon or to the Mars, like the Mars rover and all those. Of course, those are great use of robot technology to go to places that's dangerous to human beings, to fix a problem or to probe and to do things. But on the other hand, maybe there are also things that human beings just cannot go to due to size limitation, right? That's where micro and these nanorobots come into play. And of course, electron flow play a huge role. You can imagine, right? How does it power itself? You can have it thinking of it as a self-powered. But even if it's a self-powered device, it will probably have to take advantage of the glucose or whatever that's in our bloodstream as its energy source, right? And by energy source, that means it will be using up the glucose in some certain way, and there will be electron flow. Actually, you're oxidizing, or reducing that particular fuel in our body. Okay, that's what we eat. Right? We eat, that's fueling our body, and so we can use that actually to power these devices and have it wirelessly beam out, some type of information. That's also a very good use of this technology. So you might have heard of these days, even on your phone, right? These days, you always hear about these real-time bedside, or even these ask a doctor, type of thing. Your phone can actually help you do some diagnosis, because it's already probably tracking your heartbeat rate, it's tracking your number of steps. It can do a lot more. So this is what point of care diagnosis and treatment and all these mean, is that it can get these real-time data, okay, and analyze it on the spot. So if it's detecting your heartbeat rate, and then if it detects there are some irregularities with it, and not just one time, it's just maybe every week, there's certain problems with your heartbeat rate, maybe it can tell you, oh, but maybe there's something wrong, right? And so more and more of these devices, if it's being implanted, or it could be a tattoo that stick on or it's a non-invasive, maybe it's wearable things. There's just so many of these things that you can wear and do. That's again powered by electronics. Then you'll be able to better monitor your health, personal health, and you would probably be able to get on top of everything. Because just give you a very real example, a lot of the cancer, if we're able to diagnose it early on, stage 1, there are just so many options, so many chemotherapy, or radiation, or surgery. There's just so many things you can do to get rid of it, and the survival rate is actually very high. But for some of these cancer, if you detect it very, very late, late stage, stage 4 or something, it's terminal, there's just not much we can do, from the doctor's point of view. And so if there's something that you can do that you can monitor your health continuously, it's actually much better for your health and a much less burden on the society as well, because treatment early on could be a lot cheaper. There are a lot of more options. At the end, if it's towards the end, not many options. Well, if you don't have any options, well, no matter how expensive it is, you probably still have to go for it, okay? And so that's the thing, and cancer is just one example. There are many, many other examples. The earlier you detect, early detection, early treatment, it's always better for you in general. So again, this is how all these electron flow come to play. You have a biological event, and then you turn that into a digital signal, and then you turn it into something you can read on your electrical device, so that you can study it. And so that's why it's very, 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 important and useful. That. And so there are also people talking about commenting on these redox reaction being, in the early life. That's something I personally am also very interested in that. And so, of course, no one really knows what happens, for these early life. We're not talking about Big Bang, but then at least, biological life. And so there's still a lot of questions regarding, there are people talking about the RNA hypothesis, essentially, RNA being the first one, or there's also something to do with iron sulfur cluster. So iron sulfur, in these deep sea or whatever situation, there's of course, as mentioned in one of the proteins I mentioned in the slide, these iron sulfur proteins are actually pretty ancient in some sense. And there's some redox reactions going on with their, for electron transfer, that some people are proposing that could be one of the, at least earlier, cofactors in life or things like that. So yeah, redox reactions, as you can tell, is everywhere. Well, not just in early life, right? For plants, for animals, for bacteria, for things that we already talked about, all domains of life. There's some flavor of electron transfer or electron flow going on, and of course in our artificial life as well. So yeah, kudos to those who are interested in electron transfer. It's a really fun topic to study, and there's still a lot of unknown things that we want to know about.